NC State family, it's time for an honest look at your sports world. Let's get you hooked up for Pack Therapy, presented by First Horizon Bank. Here are your hosts, Tim Donnelly and Wolfpack football legend Mike Glennon.
Welcome into another edition of Pack Therapy. Tim Donnelly here alongside my co-host Mike Glennon, former NC State quarterback, 10-year NFL veteran. Eventually, I'm just going to stop introducing you. I feel like everybody's.
I think it's time.
Everybody knows who you are, but they also tune in to hear what you have to say. As always, if you have a question for Mike, you can go ahead and comment it on our YouTube channel. Go to 99.9 The Fan YouTube. There's a Pack Therapy playlist. If you comment on the videos, questions for Mike, we'll do our best to answer a bunch of them each week, and we have some here for you today. But I have a question to start. This one will come straight from me. What the heck was that? 50. I got to get my Panthers and State scores lined up here. 51-10 against Tennessee. Probably could have been a little bit worse if some things went differently at the end. Could have been a little bit better, obviously, as well. I think I'm just going to leave it at that. What the heck happened?
Yeah, I think completely outmatched. Tennessee just flat out looked like the better football team. They looked like the bully out there, and not much went right for NC State. I will say the game completely flipped on the pick six. It was 10-3 with NC State at roughly the 20-yard line. They scored there. It's a tie game where it's 10-6. Rather than it was 17-3, and it felt like all the air in the at least on the NC State side of the stadium was depleted, and from that point it was over. But look, I mean, there's a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty of who this team is going to become, because that was not good, and they're going to have to be a lot better if they want to compete for an ACC championship.
The pivot point, that pick that you brought up, and I think everybody kind of agrees, right? And you can run through the whole deal where it was a one-score game, and you have the ball, and the defense is playing well. They had already intercepted Iamaleava once, and there was a bit of back and forth. Then that interception happened, and floodgates. Almost to like quarterback nerd out on that particular play, because Grayson McCall is under such a microscope. There's the unblocked defender, the edge rusher, between you and the receiver, and you're not that far. It's a 7-8 yard throw. This is where you see in the NFL, a lot of guys have taken to like rising like you're going to throw and then coming sidearm and almost going under the arms. He tried the touch pass, like the Tony Parker floater, trying to get it over the top, and that's what airmailed it, led to the interception and the return. Is that just a simple bad decision in the moment? Is it a technique thing? With that interception being such a pivot point, I feel like we should dissect it a bit.
I think there's two things that went wrong there. After the game, Grayson McCall said there was a miscommunication with Joe Lee because he kind of stopped his route. In all my experiences playing, I've never had a receiver taught to throttle in that situation like he did. I think Joe Lee was supposed to keep running. On the other side, Grayson McCall, find a way to make the throw. Not a great coaching point, but you just got to find a way. You either got to float it. If you're going to float it, it's got to be a perfect pass, because it's got to get over the defender and down quick enough that it doesn't happen what did. Because I will say, even though the receiver stopped, I think that ball might have been picked anyway. I think it may have been too high. Or you do what you said. You stop your feet, you get the defensive end to jump, and then you kind of side armor around it. But you got to find a way. So I think it ultimately falls on both of them, and it was the clear turning point of the game.
And then Grayson McCall from that point forward, it seemed like not only was it a turning point for the team, it seemed like it was a turning point for him. Casey Concepcion was more involved prior to that, had a hard time getting him the ball after. We've talked a little bit about Grayson, in previous episodes with the let it rip mentality. It seemed like after the interception, that almost became so much more important, because he tightened up. And you've been there, I've been there, everyone that's ever played quarterback has been there. You throw the first interception, if your thought on every other play is it can't be another interception, that's not the most effective way to play. It seemed like that was amplified.
Yeah, Grayson didn't play great, but I don't think he played as bad as maybe it may be perceived. You go back and watch it, prior to that point, he was playing pretty well, and when it wasn't working, I wouldn't put it on him. He was constantly moving in the pocket. Wouldn't say receivers were particularly open. But then yes, you kind of got that sense from that point on. It was like the feeling of whether you're pressing, you're just uncomfortable, you know, and it's a natural thing to happen. You throw a pick six, you can feel the momentum change, you know, the pressure starts mounting up, and it can be hard to recover from that. And he didn't. You know, you'd like to see him bounce back in the middle of the game from that, but he did not. And but I will say that this loss, I wouldn't put it on Grayson. I also wouldn't say he did a whole lot to help them win either.
It comes with the position, and everybody knows it, right? It's not always your fault, but everybody's going to treat it as if it's your fault. The momentum, you know, I don't want to harp on this point too much, but we've talked to a bunch of people that were there in the media room, which is always a little bit isolated. You were there as a fan. You were there in the stands. That was there. You can feel it obviously, but describe what the emotions of it was, and what, those Dukes Mayo kickoff classics are pretty cool. They're an opportunity to really ride momentum, but also when that snowball gets going against you, it's pretty brutal.
The atmosphere was incredible to start. I mean, two passionate fan bases. It's
clashing colors, so you can see.
It was everything that you wanted it to be. And then at that point, it just felt like the game was over. Like 14 points really isn't that much, but kind of the offense was struggling a little bit. You could feel it. It was like, I don't think getting down 17-3, there was really a shot. And from that point on, it only got worse. So, but it was a great atmosphere. But after that pick six from the NC State side of things, it felt like it was over.
The running game. And if you take away the fourth quarter of the Western Carolina game, 7 quarters of pretty rough, hard, like every yard feels like you have to work 10 times as hard to get it in the running game. Jordan Waters at one point in time, I think it was the end of the first quarter, because I tweeted it out. Jordan Waters had -5 rushing yards, and Grayson McCall had -10 rushing yards, which obviously includes the sacks. But I mean, against a team like Tennessee with some of the explosive offense, you want to keep them off the field. You want your running game to kind of dominate tempo. As you look towards, obviously, Louisiana Tech this weekend, but then bigger ACC games in the future, how concerned are you about the NC State running game being able to alleviate some of the pressure off of Concepcion and McCall in that passing game?
Yeah, I'm definitely concerned. I think that was more the what stood out to me was how the offensive line is struggling, how the running backs are kind of struggling to get anything going. And it feels kind of like an identity thing. Like, who are we as an offense? Are we a run to pass team? Or are we going to become a pass to run team? But even within the run game, the schemes we're running, it just doesn't seem to be working. It's a lot of outside zone, and there's a lot of penetration. And to me, Jordan Waters feels like he's more of a guy, basically what Tennessee was doing. They were pulling yards and tackles all over the place, and the running back was getting behind that guy and then making his decision, where that's what Jordan Waters to me kind of feels like. He's like a guy that get behind, a lead blocker, let him be patient and then make the cut. He just doesn't seem to fit the whole outside zone scheme, where you just, you're stretching and cutting, and you might have to, make a guy miss and go all the way back, where the backside's really the front side of the cut. It just, right now, that offense, or the run game on our offense, is not gelling.
Hollywood Smothers had a little spark, and I don't know. Obviously, Jordan Waters is the guy they expect to be the bell cow, but when your change of pace back is having the most success, when does he become the pace rather than the change of pace?
Right. And I think that kind of goes along with what I'm saying. He seems to fit kind of that outside zone scheme a little bit more. I will say on his very first one, it was a gaping hole that Jordan Waters didn't have all game. But I think it's on the coaches to kind of figure out what runs in the run game are they going to feature, and who are they going to become. And the offensive line needs to do a better job in penetration. And Tennessee's defense line was loaded, and they had guys that I felt like were low center of gravity guys, and they were getting underneath us and just causing way too much disruption in the backfield.
Maybe a conversation for an off-season version of Pack Therapy, but James Pierce, who's going to be a first rounder, from Charlotte. He actually, has some high school background with Hollywood Smothers, who we just brought up, and there's a couple of very, very big, highly ranked recruits in the state of North Carolina right now that are committed to Tennessee. So that's something that the in-state schools, including NC State, should probably take note of. I've covered areas where an out-of-state school dominates the recruiting, and it's very disheartening when you look at like the top 10 recruits in the state, and you see some out-of-state school, getting number 1, 3, 7, 9, and 10. So James Pierce, obviously a stud. In person, did you see the Tennessee? Like, there's an element of Clemson getting beat by Georgia by 30, and then they show up and smack Appalachian State the next week, and all of a sudden everyone's going, well, would anyone in the ACC not get smacked around by Georgia? Is Tennessee a team that by the end of the year we might look at this NC State game and go, well, I mean, yeah, you got smacked, but at least it was by a top 5 team in the country. Are they that good?
I think they're very good, and really up front, defensively and offensively. They looked like some guys. I'll say I was a little. You see the talent in Nico. Mm-hmm. He didn't look like a finished product yet. I think he's got legit NFL upside, but not quite completely there yet. But yes, at the end of the year, we'll be talking about Tennessee being in the hunt in the. With that said, it's important for we talk about maybe 3. There's really 3 spots for NC State to get in the playoff. 2 of them the ACC championship, 1 at the at-large. I think the at-large bid is gone because when you get beat that bad by an opponent, I don't know if there's a way you can justify that they deserve to get in.
And unfortunately, the way the ACC is playing, 3rd at-large, obviously the ACC champion gets in. I think if you make the ACC championship and you have a strong regular season resume, there's a good chance you'll get in as long as you don't get smacked in the ACC championship. That 3rd team might not be coming from the ACC. The way that they've played over the first 2.5 weeks, it's just, you look at the standings. Right now, if the AP poll were the college football playoff rankings, we don't have the CFP rankings yet, it would be just Miami in. And hard to argue with that the way the first couple of games have gone. So it just puts more emphasis on the ACC play. It puts more emphasis, and again, fortunately for State, you still have all those goals ahead of you, right? The entire conference schedule is ahead of you. Before we look ahead a little bit to Louisiana Tech, this is an unfair question to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I think I noticed it more times in this game than I expected. How much is this defense missing Peyton Wilson?
Yes.
There's one play that I see in my brain over and over again. It's Nico showing off some of that skill set where he steps up and then ends up running for a first down to the right. And Sean Brown, who is replacing Peyton Wilson as far as in his position, it's right there. It's an open field tackle. And I couldn't help but think Peyton Wilson makes this play. And it's probably near the line of scrimmage. It's probably a gain of 2 or 3. Instead, Yamaliava, Nico got the edge all the way to the right, ends up picking up the first down and getting out of bounds. It didn't look like much, but it's just getting off the field. And I don't know how much obviously we appreciated Peyton Wilson in the moment. It feels like they are like 2 Peyton Wilson plays a half away from being almost as good as they were last year, but those 2 plays are the third downs, are the getting off the field plays, and it's leading to a much different defense.
Right now, this defense, I don't think opposing offenses are going to fear them. I feel like last year, teams feared playing NC State because of Peyton Wilson. And when you go back and kind of watch that Tennessee game, like I mentioned, they were pulling the offensive linemen a ton, and those offensive linemen that were pulling were getting to the second level with the linebackers, and our linebackers were not shedding them. They were not making plays, and quite frankly, they were kind of getting dominated. And I think that's where we're really missing Peyton Wilson and his presence. And look, it's hard to replace a guy.
It's unfair. I said the question. It's an unfair question.
The Falcons Steelers game the other day, they throw a wide receiver screen to Bijan Robinson, one of the shiftiest guys in the NFL. He makes the first guy miss. All of a sudden, you see Peyton Wilson shed the block, dive off of him, and get Bijan down. It would have been probably a walk-in touchdown. So guys like that, I mean, they just don't grow on trees, and it's going to continue to be something that they have to find ways as collectively as a unit to make up for the loss of his presence.
Yeah, and LSU misses Jaden Daniels, and like you're going to miss those players, and it's not going to be his best defensive player in the country last year. It's just, I think it's changed the way Tony Gibson can call games. You bring up all the pulls. There's like, I just have these images of like a guard pulling, and Peyton Wilson is smart enough to recognize that, and he like follows the guard and shoots that gap to make the play on the front side. It's those plays are special for a reason. He is who he is for a reason. I think the defense is missing him. Give credit to guys like Davin Vann, Aiden White. I know it was late, but that's a special play from a couple of very good players where Davin Van got the quarterback hit, and then Aiden White chug, made it all the way in on the pick six. About last 20 yards, felt like he was sucking wind a bit, but there is talent on the defense. It's just different, and I think they're missing.
There is talent, and I think Davin Van has been playing well, but it still feels like defensively, if it's not an all-out pressure, they're not getting home on the quarterback, and it's just there's not as much big plays being made by them. And I think Peyton obviously played a huge role in that last year.
For as tough as this, particularly that second half was for State, as I brought up, so many goals still ahead of them. We'll take a quick break here. When we come back, is Louisiana Tech a get-back game? What do they need to do to use it as a get-back game? It's coming up next. Stick around. And we're back here on Pack Therapy. Tim Donnelly here alongside Mike Glennon. Louisiana Tech this weekend. It's I guess we can go into like the psyche of it. What is it like in the locker room after a game like that Tennessee game, knowing you have to turn the page, but you want to watch the film, you want to learn, you don't want to harp on it, you want to flush it, but there's that both sides you want to play.
Yeah, I think that bus ride back after the game last week, I know me as quarterback would be eager to get to my iPad and watch it right away. You see what went wrong, see what you can improve on, and then you got to flush it. I mean, the new opponent's coming in this week with Louisiana Tech, and then obviously next week with Clemson. So you got to learn from the mistakes. Coaches have to get together, figure out what the plan is going to be for this week and going forward. We talk about identity, trying to answer those questions. And as a player, you're eager to get back out on the practice field on Tuesday because you want to get back to work and get that taste out of your mouth.
I told this story on the afternoon show earlier this week, but I'll relay it again here. Twice in my career, my college coach and once my high school coach did the very, very dramatic, performative burning of the tape. I thought it was always funny in college because he did it on like Tuesday morning after he knows that the players would have watched it on Sunday. You would have watched it with your position coach on Monday, and then Tuesday before practice, we buried it. We went out and literally buried a DVD as if it's not still in all of our digital cut-ups and saved in the cloud. But part of me thinks this game, I'm never one for the dramatics, but the metaphor of flushing that one and saying that's not us, we are so much better than that we're just gonna kind of chalk that up as a weird game in Charlotte. I see a little logic there.
I do, but I think it's a little early in the season to be doing that. You got to learn from your mistakes. I feel like that's something you do a little bit later in the season where you may be playing really well and then all of a sudden you have that bad game and it's like that's not who we are. We have evidence to show in the past that's not who we are. Right now we don't have a whole lot of evidence. And between the Western Carolina game and the Tennessee game, I think there are still a lot of questions and answers to be had to figure out who this team is going to be. So I do see the metaphor of you do mentally kind of have to get to move on, but at the same time, you got to learn from the mistakes.
Louisiana Tech, obviously, we're not going to do a full breakdown of what they're bringing to the table. You mentioned Clemson, not this weekend, but next. There's 0% chance you're overlooking Louisiana Tech after the way the first two games have gone.
Oh, you definitely cannot be overlooking this opponent as they come in. I mean, we see what happened to Notre Dame with Northern Illinois, with Northern Illinois coming in town in 3 weeks. But I think
Riley Leonard.
You definitely want to get back on the right track, really for the first time, and put it on the field. It's about doing it on game day. And finding a way to fix what they've done wrong in the past and hopefully get this thing headed in the right direction as they get ready for Clemson next week.
I want to go to some of our YouTube comment questions. I have 3 of them here. And I think these are actually ways that you can, they all apply to something going into the Louisiana Tech game. So we'll use that. This one comes at T to the Rock, who actually has asked a few of them throughout this. And T to the Rock, I like his questions. I pick them before I see what the handles are. So shout out to T. Question for Mike. Do quarterbacks get overly concerned about individual guys getting the lion's share of the targets in a game? It seems there was some angst about Casey getting 14 targets versus Western Carolina. To me, you feed your best players the football regardless of opponent. And I think that's kind of in relation to Casey got the ball so often early against Tennessee, and then he did go quiet as the game moved on.
Yeah, I think it's in the back of your mind. You don't want to force it, but at the same time, you want to get your playmakers the ball. I think that more falls on the coordinator than it does the quarterback. As a quarterback, you're taught and trained to let the defense dictate where the ball goes. The sometimes it may come up where they're playing man coverage, and you have mirror routes. So you say you have KC on the left running to go, you got Noah Rogers on the right running to go. And, I'm going to take my best matchup. I want to get Casey the ball. I think that's more of where it comes up. And then it falls on the offensive coordinator that maybe somewhere on his call sheet, he has a little, section of, call it 5 to 10 plays where Casey is the main target, whether it's the first read in the progression or it's like a receiver screen where he's getting it.
I actually use you as an example for when we're talking about this particular thing in football. And I'm sure you remember this, but your Under Armour All-American game where I think you won MVP.
Yeah.
And I don't know, and I'm making up these statistics, but it's something like this. You had like 9 completions and 8 of them were to Julio. Yeah. And, I use that story as like, as a quarterback, if you have Julio Jones and you're going up against high schoolers, you're dumb not to throw it to Julio Jones. And heck, you might even get an MVP out of it, which you ended up getting in that Under Armour All-American game. And I've always kind of used that. I make the joke. I've like, the little nostalgic highlight reel from my college years. If you watch it, you would probably go like, is this a highlight film for the quarterback or is this a highlight film for number 19, who was like my go-to wide receiver? If you have opportunities to get your best player against a favorable matchup, yes, like throw it to him. Do not worry about the feelings of your tight end in that moment. Do not worry about the feelings of your number 3 wide receiver in that moment. Usually football evens those things up, meaning if you go to KC Concepcion, he gets 3 touchdowns in week 1. If you would have peppered him with targets against Tennessee and he had 2 touchdowns in week 2, eventually he's going to be double teamed. Eventually he's going to have the safety over the top on every single play. And that's where you keep a defense honest going elsewhere. If you can keep getting the ball to KC Concepcion and teams aren't taking it away, give the ball to KC Concepcion. Go win him the Bolitnikov because it's that obvious, and you knew that as a 17-year-old in the Under Armour All-American game. Get it to Julio Jones. That's not a bad idea.
That's funny. I remember I was shocked when I got MVP of that game because I'm like, wait a minute, like all my throws were Julio. How did he not win it? But yes, I think
quarterbacks
you
get all the credit.
do. And if guys start chirping on the sideline of the other receivers that he keeps throwing to KC, well, that's on them. I mean, it's not on the quarterback to have to worry about spreading the ball out. You got to do your job and let the defense dictate where it goes. And if they start proving that they can become as good as KC, then you know what, maybe I will throw it to you if all things are equal.
Or then you get to nitpicking. Then you just know you're as the example you used, if you have mirror routes, you pick the worst corner, right? Like then it's you go to the next level of your scouting report. Back to the questions here on YouTube. Brian McDermott 4204 asks, I wrote off the Western Carolina game as looking ahead to UT. Looking back, is it wrong to think NC State gave the Catamounts their full attention but have major deficiencies on the O-line and front 6? If it was one, I kind of agree with the commenter. If it was one game where like Tennessee dominated you in the trenches, all right, they got a bunch of NFL dudes, they're studs. But when you pair that with some of the things we talked about after the Western Carolina game, the run game not getting going, their offensive line, even for Western Carolina, got some push off the line of scrimmage. With 2 games now, how much to the trenches were you?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I left that game. I'm more concerned with the offensive line. I wouldn't call it the defensive line, but more the line of scrimmage on defense with the linebackers as well than I am call it Grayson McCall. I think there is definite reason to look back and worry and say that, to your point, Tennessee's got some dudes. It might be hard to run the ball or stop the run, but that's 2 weeks in a row now that this offensive run game hasn't gotten going with clearly inferior talent in Western Carolina. So I think that's a very fair point and question to bring up. I don't know if they were looking forward to Tennessee as much as there's actual concern physically what they're capable of doing.
And sometimes we group it, and this is like how we talk about football. We talk about the quarterback. We talk about the running back. We talk about maybe a wide receiver, a few wide receivers. Then we talk about the offensive line as if it's like one dude because they're one unit and, 5 guys working as one ultimate team position. But there's 5 guys up there. It's hard once the season starts to change your offensive line or to change your defensive front, which is why I think so often, when things are going bad, you get a quarterback change, even if, an objective eye will look at it and go, I don't know if it's really the quarterback that's the fault here, but it's just something that you can change. It's never smart to go, you can't go middle school basketball and sub out all 5, right? I get all of you get out, 5 new guys get in the game. You can't do that with the running game. So when concerns pop up about the trenches, my intent is go up a little bit more because, it's hard at this point. It's changing the engine while driving 80 miles an hour down the highway. It's hard to make whole scale changes in the trenches once the season in the conveyor belt starts.
Right. And I don't know personnel wise, you can. It kind of reminds me when I was with the Arizona Cardinals, we had an assistant coach who had been defensive or D2 offensive coordinator for like 10 years prior. And he goes, you at that level, the coaching is so much different because it's like we may have a 200-pound guard going against, a 300-pound defense tackle, and we have to find a way to mitigate that. And it's like a whole new level of game planning where we are completely outmatched. And I'm not saying that's what's going on with NC State, but it's like it's on the coaches to find a way to make the most of the personnel. I mean, Anthony Belton's talked about being a first rounder, and I think he's playing well. You look at what they did when Icky was there. It was like all the time they were running Icky side on tosses to let him kind of pull and get out front. So maybe we have to kind of change up our run game and it might become more, whether it's directionally, whether it's schematically, find a way as coaches to make it so all our weakest players on the offensive line are not at the point of attack.
Which leads us to the final comment I want to bring up from @SmokinAces. Ask this: am I crazy for thinking Anai runs stagnant offenses? Everyone says he's a mad scientist, but if the run game is slow, he's kind of predictable and can force it to KC. The reason why I picked this question to ask is for exactly what we just said. Robert Anai's reputation is he looks at the talents and the abilities of the roster and crafts this completely unique, totally customized offense around that group. Yet we haven't seen a ton of that so far this year. When it comes to, like you said, hey, if you have an Ike Ekwonu, get him out on the edge running because he's the bananas athlete. If you have a KC Concepcion, be as creative as possible getting him the ball. We saw this last year with how they made the running game, I wouldn't even say like above average, but passable with Brennan Armstrong and KC Concepcion as the main guys. Are we going to see the mad scientist come out?
Right now, up to this point, it does. This offense feels a little reminiscent of last year at this time where it was like, who are they? Quarterback not playing at the highest level, offense line all around. And I will give Anai credit that kind of following that Duke loss and they had a bye week, it felt like they kind of circled the wagons and found a way to get it done. So I think, again, another good question that as of right now, I tend to agree that it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of answers for what Tennessee was throwing at them. My hope is that as the season progresses, particularly after last week and before next week against Clemson, they're able to find some solutions like they did last year.
I'm always leery to go full gimmick, right? Because I don't want to call what the running game was at the end of the year full gimmick, but when you're making a running game happen essentially with speed sweeps and motions into the backfield and quarterback designed runs, you don't want to have to go there, right? You want to hold off as long as you can. I always the example I use is the Wildcat Dolphins that one year. Like, no one wants their running game to be Ricky Williams and Ronnie Brown running the Wildcat. You want to be able to just have your quarterback turn and hand it off and run downhill like other running backs of that era could. But at a certain point, you look around and go, I don't know if we have a choice. The Patriots in our division, they're winning, 100 straight divisions. So let's try something new. I get the sense, and you brought it up at the Duke game last year. It did feel like they finally went, all right, it's not worth clinging to, handing it off to, the halfback dive, 34 power for, 10, 15 times a game. Let's just embrace whatever we are. I don't think they're there yet. I think they're still clinging to we can have a traditional run game. We don't need to use Casey Concepcion like we did last year, but they do have that in their back pocket if they need it.
They do, but again, I don't think you want to go down that route, go that way yet, because also comparing it to last year is Brennan Armstrong was a real threat to run the ball, where Grayson McCall is not that. So I think you got to cater around the quarterback always, like they did last year with Brennan. And I think they got to find a way of what brings out the best in Grayson McCall. And then with that, okay, now let's find a way to get Casey the ball and all of our playmakers the balls. And I think this offense, as the season progresses, we may see it really become a pass first, run second, pass to run rather than run to pass, and let the guys on the outside be the ones making the plays, because right now it's not happening in the run game.
Air Doran on the way. Never thought we'd be making those kind of descriptions. Louisiana Tech this week, ACC schedule. Clemson really gets it underway the following week, and as I said, the ACC still there for the taking. Miami looks good, but there's a lot of wide open other than that. So we'll continue to keep you updated on Pack Therapy. Thank you to Mike as always. Comment your questions for Mike. YouTube video, all through the replies. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll answer them as we have done the past few weeks. Until then, have a great week and go Pack.